Today we're going to talk about new American diplomacy. We are now moving into a phase where the U.S. has become an imperial power, and so we're going to look at the foreign policies of McKinley and Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson. Okay, so here we go. So to get us started, a little background information. China versus Japan. So in 1894, Japan is going to fight a war with China and they're going to win. And this shocked the world. Okay, because nobody really knew the power of Japan because, like I said before, they were kind of a hermit kingdom. They were very isolationist until the U.S. kind of woke them up with opening a port to trade. And after that, they decided that they want to become an imperial power too. So Britain, France, Germany, and Russia were concerned over Japan's growing power. And the reason for that is because they have spheres of influence in China. So I talked about this a little bit before, but a sphere of influence is where a country controls the economy of a certain area. Okay, so for example, in Shanghai, Britain controlled Shanghai. So they controlled the economy there. They owned all the factories and all the businesses there. They had a military presence to protect their economic interests there as well. In addition to, China had a military presence as well, not nearly as large, but the Chinese still still control that area. Okay, so that's what's going on there. So let's look here. This shows the different spheres of influence. So you can see the British control quite a bit. Okay, they control this green. Then the French here, the Japanese. Okay, like I said, you got the Germans, and then you got the Russians here. Now notice a country, the pretty big important country that we talk a lot about in U.S. history is the U.S. Okay, so they're not there. So, like I said, we didn't have a sphere of influence. So, the Secretary of State, John Hay, said that China should be able to trade outside the spheres of influence. Basically, we said, why can't we just have free trade? Okay, free trade benefits everybody. But really, the purpose is we wanted to trade with China too. And so, this led us to adopt an open door policy, which basically would open the doors of China to the world, in particular the US. Okay, so that way we could trade freely with China and with everybody else. So many Chinese did not like this corrupt influence of these foreign countries. Some people thought it was because of nativism, which basically meant that they didn't like the foreigners. And, can you blame them in that regard? So the Chinese are going to form what's called the Boxers. That was their nickname. Their real name was the Society of the Harmonious Fists, which is a cool name. But the Boxers was their nickname because they trained in boxing. Okay, they thought that in that regard, they were able to kind of gain a special advantage. And so they fought corruption by attacking the foreign embassies. And all this is going to lead to what's called the Boxer Rebellion. So this is going to start in Beijing, and they're going to attack, in particular, Christian missionaries. So the Christian missionaries who were there were really insensitive to the religion of the Chinese. Obviously, they wanted the people to convert to Christianity. Well, most of the people were Confucianist. And so they didn't accept, Christianity. And then in addition, the spheres of influence brought a lot of poverty to the Chinese. So the Chinese were forced to work and they weren't allowed to open up businesses inside the spheres of influence. So while like the British, for example, were very, very wealthy, the Chinese were very, very poor. And so in the Boxer Rebellion, they're going to murder about 200 foreign nationals and take many hostages. It is estimated that throughout the whole rebellion, about 100,000 people died. But as a result of this, 8 countries, U.S. included, are going to send about 50,000 troops in order to stop the rebellion. And that's when the big amount of deaths are going to occur, is once the military gets sent in from the Europeans and the U.S., is when a lot of those deaths happen. So, Roosevelt's diplomacy. So, 1901, President McKinley was attacked by Leon Czolgosz. So, he was assassinated at a place called the Temple of Music. and that's in Buffalo, New York. And he was basically receiving visitors. There was kind of like a receiving line where people would go through and shake the president's hand and meet with him. And when Czolgosz got up there, Czolgosz was a major anarchist, and he slapped the president's hand away and then shot him twice in the abdomen. The first shot hit off a button and lodged itself in the jacket, so that didn't cause any damage. But the second shot lodged itself in the abdomen. Now, this should not have been fatal, but his doctors, McKinley's doctors, were horribly incompetent, and he died of infection 8 days later. Czolgosz eventually, about a month later, he will be executed by the electric chair. So Theodore Roosevelt's going to take over. He's 42 at the time, so that makes him, up to this point, the youngest president. Now, remember, he's a war hero, so he was the leader of the Charge Up San Juan Hill. Remember the Rough Riders charged up San Juan Hill, and that was the big turning point of the Spanish-American War. Now, he was a very loud, boisterous guy with very specific ideas about how the U.S. should be run. And the people kind of thought, well, the politicians kind of thought that, you know what, if we make him vice president, it would kind of give him the illusion of power without actually having power. And so maybe it'll kind of keep him quiet. Well, they didn't count on McKinley being assassinated. And so once that happened, a lot of people became very scared of what Roosevelt was going to do. Okay. So he favored increasing the U.S. power in the world, and he also supported the ideas of Anglo-Saxonism. And basically, Anglo-Saxonism is the idea that English-speaking countries, the cultures, the economies are better than most, and so that they should spread that around to the rest of the world. And he's also in favor of the Monroe Doctrine. So we'll talk more about the Monroe Doctrine, but basically the Monroe Doctrine said Europeans are not allowed in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, so he is very militaristic in that regard. So he believed in what was called big stick diplomacy. Okay, so his famous phrase was "Speak softly and carry a big stick." Speak softly and carry a big stick. Okay, so the U.S. would have a strong global military presence, and then because we were so powerful, other countries would be too intimidated to challenge us. And so, like I said, he said, speak softly and carry a big stick. So, for example, he's going to send the Great White Fleet around the world. So, basically, what happened is Roosevelt had 16 new warships constructed. And then he sent this fleet, they were all painted white. It was sent on a voyage around the world. And here's what that looked like. Oh, hold on. I'll show you a map in a second. But the purpose was to show off basically the American strength, okay? And so it was to intimidate potential enemies. This is a picture of the Great White Fleet here, okay? So this is what that would have looked like going around in the ocean coming at you. There was no fighting. They were just sent around just to show off, just to say, hey, these are the weapons we have. Don't mess with us. And so this is the route that they took. Okay, so you can see they went all over the world. They went, through the United States. They had some stops in the United States, Latin America, Europe and Africa, and all the way over to Asia and Australia, New Zealand. So one of the things that the U.S. decides they need is to have, because we have two oceans that we have on our borders. So we need a way to be able to connect our navies instead of having two separate navies. So the U.S. sent 10 warships to help Panama gain independence from Colombia. So basically, we want to build a canal right here. Okay, the French actually started building a canal in Panama, and we are going to try to finish it. Okay, so the French left largely because they were all catching malaria and dying. But we're going to try to finish the canal, and it's going to go right through here, okay, right in what's called the Isthmus of Panama, right here. And the point is so we can connect the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans. So Roosevelt ordered the construction of the Panama Canal, and It increased economic and military mobility for the U.S., and it cuts about 8,000 miles off of a trip from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Because before the canal, you would have to go all the way around South America to get like from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Okay, so this right here shows the Panama Canal. This is where it is. Okay, so there's a series of locks and dams that like raise and lower ships to get them through here, and then there's a big lake here that they go through, and then they go through another series of locks and dams before they can get out to. This is the Pacific over here. This is the Atlantic over here. So this right here shows again the Panama Canal, and so to go from New York to San Francisco, it would be about 12,000 miles. But to go to New York to San Francisco using the canal, now it's only 4,000. So it's a lot easier to maneuver through the world. So the Roosevelt Corollary. So I mentioned the Monroe Doctrine before. Basically, it said that North America and Latin America would not be interfered with by European powers. Okay, so basically what it did is it made the United States the police, essentially, of the Western Hemisphere. And then the Roosevelt Corollary went along with that, and it said that the U.S. could use force in order to maintain order and economic stability in Latin America. So what this does is it makes the U.S. more of a military presence in Latin America because we want to get more involved economically down there. So Taft believed in dollar diplomacy, so he's going to be president after Roosevelt, and he was much less militaristic and much more economic. Okay, economic focus. So that's what the dollar diplomacy was. Is it focused diplomacy on Latin America and Asia using economics? Okay, so that means trade and or economic aid instead of the military to foster relations. So the idea was if everybody's making money and getting rich, then everybody's going to be happy. And so Taft called it trading dollars for bullets. Okay, so instead of using the military now, Taft wants to use our strong economy to build relations with these foreign countries. Then Woodrow Wilson, he believed in what was called moral diplomacy. He basically opposed imperialism altogether, and he said that the only reason why we should use the military is to build up democratic governments in other countries. Okay, so the idea was if we build up these democratic countries, they'll be more friendly to us, and then we can build diplomacy that way. Okay, so he was more focused on just allowing those countries to have democracies. So to put this into practice, we did attempt to set up a democratic government in Mexico. And then the Mexicans that were led by Pancho Villa, that's him there, rebelled against the United States. And then they attacked the city of Columbus, killing 16 Americans. Eventually what's going to happen is Wilson's going to have to pull out the troops because World War I is going to start. Okay, and so Mexico's kind of left to their own devices at that point. All right. That's all I got for you today. Don't forget to do your homework. It is the acrostic. Roosevelt is the word. So make sure you write complete sentences and have a good day.